I understand you're working with Representative John Mizuno on some of the homeless issues also.
Yes, he and I have already spoken, and right now we're working with domestic violence survivors, and both he and I were trying to actively support this one domestic violence survivor who's right at the edge of losing her child to her perpetrator husband, ex-husband, who was seeking sole custody. This man beat this woman so severely that she lost her 4-month-old fetus. It was a second trimester pregnancy, and he beat her so bad she lost the baby. He spent some time in jail, and then he gets out, and now he's seeking sole custody to take their 2.5-year-old daughter back to the mainland, to Minnesota. And obviously the mom is just, completely devastated and can't understand why, this can be allowed to occur when, especially based upon this gentleman's violent past. So we're looking at trying to, looking at the law and looking at, are the courts actually following the law? Are they following what the law says that they're supposed to do in these kinds of cases? Because it seems as though there are many examples out there where the courts are not. So we would like to investigate this further and find out if in fact the courts are following what they're supposed to be following.
Sounds like as a former police captain that his background would be pretty relevant to some of the investigations. In fact, it sounds like almost the same thing, except you're on a different side of the table looking at it from a policy point of view.
Absolutely.
Representative Johanson, were you surprised to hear that there was no high school on the south of Maui? Because I know your penchant for education is very big.
I was, particularly because District 32 encompasses 13 schools within its boundaries, and that's 3 school complexes within the DOE. And so, for me, that's a stark contrast. And education, I think, is something that touches all of our districts and that we'll all fight for. But particularly for me, it's something that is a personal cause. Having been a proud graduate of the Moanalua Public Schools, I saw directly what our public education system is like, both the areas where we can improve, but also the strengths that exist. And so I hope very much in this next legislative session, particularly with some key things coming up, i.e. the composition and selection of our newly appointed Board of Education and the mechanics of that. Really hope to be able to dive in deep and make sure that we do enact the structural reforms necessary to really empower our teachers and our principals to just be achieving our fullest potential within the educational system. So it's a big surprise, and I think clearly Maui's in need of.
You want to be on the Education Committee, so you can help make that a reality.
I hope to have that privilege. Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of Mauna Loa High School, did you leave out one little tidbit about being the state debate champion? I want people to know that we're going to expect some real good dialogue on the House floor. I call it the marketplace of ideas. There are like 2,000 bills that come in the beginning, and they end up with only about 200. So there's a big boiling down argumentative process by which we have to go through. So we look forward to your debating skills. Well, let's go to the North Shore and what's important and what Gil's got on his mind.
The North Shore, it rolls off everyone's tongue, keep the country country, and people do believe that. As much in town, I would say, as we do out on the North Shore. And if we're going to retain the rural character of the district and the agricultural uses, we've got to be proactive. It's just not going to happen by itself. The plantations are gone. There's a lot of land. There's a lot of land for sale. There's a lot of people looking. There's a lot in play. I would argue that the North Shore could be Oahu's breadbasket. It's got some of the best soils, it's got some of the best weather, it's got the lands, it's got the expertise. There are farmers actually making good money, contrary to what many people think farming can be a productive and profitable enterprise. So I'm going to be working very, very closely with the others in the Agriculture Committee and within the industry to find some solutions, number one of which is getting clean water out of Lake Wilson. One of the biggest obstacles holding back agriculture on the North Shore, besides the land issues, are getting clean water to the properties so that farmers can actually expand their
By clean water,
operations.
you don't mean drinkable water, or do you mean clean water that doesn't hurt the crops because it's brackish, or when you say clean water?
The water coming out of Lake Wilson is not adequate for growing vegetables. You can only grow tree crops, which never mattered when we were growing sugarcane, but you cannot grow vegetables or things that most people think of as food because it's not clean enough. It's rated R2, and we need to get it at least up to R1. So there's several issues there. There's many stakeholders. But I think where there's a will, there's a way, and I think it needs to happen. I think the demand is there. People know that we only grow about 10 to 15% of our food is grown within the state. 85 to 90% is imported. So for every reason, we need to be proactive in keeping the country.
It's a very good point. Other than tomatoes, I think, and watermelon, everything else basically that we consume is imported. The agricultural lands, unfortunately, sugar and pineapple, are growing weeds and growing houses. And the imperative to get back into the land is very, very important. I was just reading the other day that the seed corn companies are now up to maybe 250 million in annual sales, almost equivalent to what sugar was at one point in the 80s before it took a nosedive. And the amount of acreage is very, very small. The point is farming, but farming smart in what is a niche market with a very high quality and a price, rather than massive stuff like sugarcane and others that were very labor intensive.
Yeah, I would say it's dangerous to put all your eggs in one basket, as we all know. And if you have one large plantation, then you're at the mercies of whether that enterprise survives or not. So we talk about diversification in many ways around the state to balance our income and economy. And same thing, we need diversified agriculture. I mean, there's a million things that need to happen. The infrastructure, the processing of facilities. If they're relying on well water, they've got to pump the water. And if you're at high elevations, the cost of electricity to drive those pumps is prohibitive right now. Kamehameha Schools is got a very, very healthy plan to remain in agriculture, and they've got the wind farms that they're going to be building up in the hills above, Koiloa, above basically between Waimea and Haleiwa. So they've got some proactive plans for helping improve the area and keep it as people would like it to be.
That's encouraging to hear from my Hawaii Kai farmer's perspective, keeping the land in agriculture.
Yes.
I've got a whole valley, Kamilanui Valley, that is threatened to not have farmers because the rents have, well, at least the bargaining and the negotiations that are going on now, may be too high for them to afford to be able to make money. And farming is not an easy profession. It's hard work. And the amount of markup is nominal. If you know the markup in supermarkets is very, very, very small. Mm-hmm. And it's tough being a farmer. We've got to encourage it. And gentlemen, in the state constitution, that's one of the priorities, preservation of agricultural land, which is essentially saying preservation of the lifestyle by which we have.